Yes, hello, welcome back to the Rugby League Forecast podcast. My name is Connor Moran, and today I will be going through my round one predicted team lists for both the Knights and the Cowboys and the Bulldogs and the Dragons, which are both games in Vegas for round one this year. That kicks off on March the 1st, 2026. So it's going to be a really interesting start to the season. I'm really looking forward, especially to the Bulldogs Dragons game. The Knights and Cowboys, I'd say that's probably harder to pick. I'd say the Bulldogs will, you know, well, I think most people would tip the Bulldogs to beat the Dragons, but I thought I'd write down my team lists of who will be starting and taking into consideration who won't be there. For example, Jeremiah Nanai for the Cowboys, he'll be out for the early exchanges of the season. So, yeah, I mean, not long to go now. What's today? January 9th. You know, just a bit under 2 months. It'll come up quick. We've got the trials coming in 4 weeks. And that's going to be a really interesting period, the preseason challenge, just to see where coaches will play certain players, such as Dylan Brown for Newcastle. Will he wear the 6? Will he wear the 7? Fletcher Sharp, Justin Holbrook came out yesterday and said that Fletcher Sharp will not be on the wing. So it's going to be interesting to see where he plays. I think that probably means he ends up in the halves alongside Dylan Brown, but yeah, I think there's a lot of questions going into the Vegas games for these sides in terms of positions, who's replacing those who are injured, what are the spines going to look like. I think it's going to be really intriguing. I'll just find the page first of where I wrote all this down. I brought the book with me. I should have opened the page when I started. I opened up the wrong book. Sorry. That's the 2024 book. Right, here we go. Round one, Cowboys and Knights. So this is my Cowboys round one squad for the Vegas game starting on March the 1st, 2026 for the National Rugby League. So Scott Drinkwater at fullback in the number 1 jersey. Number 2, Robert Derby. Number 3, Jackson Purdue. Number 4, Zach Laybut. Number 5, Murray Talangi. Number 6, Jake Clifford. Number 7, Tom Dearden. Number 8, Jason Taumalolo. Number 9, Reed Marnie. Number 10, Cohen Hess. 11, Helam Lukey. 12, John Bateman. And 13, Ruben Cotter. On the bench, this is where I might be totally wrong, but I've got number 14, Braden Burns. 15, Harrison Edwards, 16, Sam McIntyre, and 17, Kai O'Donnell. Don't be surprised if Matt Lodge is somewhere on the bench, or perhaps they start with Matt Lodge in the number 8 jersey and Taumalolo comes off the bench. But for me, I think Robert Derby wins the number 2 jersey. Jackson Purdue, I think, starts in the centres. There was a question mark, where do they play Purdue, in the halves or the centres? I reckon he'll get first crack in that number 3 jersey where he started the season in 2025. Zach Laybut, well, he's had a real struggle in his career when it comes to injuries, and I really hope he can have an injury-free year, because this guy's a freak. He's a really good centre. We saw a little bit of him in the 2024 season. We haven't seen overly too much of him. So if he can have an injury-free year, I think he could be up there with one of the best centres in the game. I've got a massive rap on Zach Laybut. In the limited games he's played, he's really impressed me as a rugby league fan watching him. Murray Talangi, he'll be on the wing. I think he's got that spot. A Queensland and Australian representative. I reckon he's got that number 5 jersey. Jake Clifford and Tom Dearden. Well, I think Jake Clifford will start in the 6. As I mentioned, I reckon they'll start Jackson Purdue in the centres. Clifford, his kicking game's really good. He's got a great long kicking game. I think he's going to be outstanding in that 5/8 position. Tom Dearden, the 7. I think Tom Dearden, he's the 7. I think if Todd Payten starts Tom Dearden as the 6, I think it's a huge mistake. He's the 7, and he needs to be the 7 at the Cowboys long term for 10 years. I think what he did in Origin 2 and Origin 3 last year, replacing Daly Cherry Evans in Game 1, goes to show that he can direct a side around. I think he's definitely going to start the 7 and as captain alongside Ruben Cotter. Jason Taumalolo, this one's up for... I think he starts. I reckon he starts. He had a good first half of the year in 2025. I reckon he starts at prop. Reed Marnie, They've bought him to replace Reece Robson. Reed Marnie will be an 80-minute hooker, and that's why I don't have necessarily a replacement on the bench for hooker. Cohen Hess will be the number 10 for the Vegas game. Griffin Neame is coming back from injury, so he'll be out early in the season. He'll normally be the number 10 alongside Jason Taumalolo, you'd assume, but Cohen Hess for that game, I reckon, will start at prop. Number 11, Helam Lukey. He was out all year last year for the Cowboys. As I mentioned in their 2025 review, what a huge loss he was for that 2025 season. He was just so instrumental for the Cowboys in 2023, 2024. And look, as I mentioned in the review yesterday, Jeremiah Nanai has all the talent in the world, but Helam Lukey brings consistency. And yes, he's talented, he's athletic, Helam Lukey, but you just know what you're going to get with him. And I think they really lacked his reliability last year in 2025. So he'll start in the number 11 jersey. Number 12, John Bateman. He will replace Jeremiah Nanai. I've gone with Bateman to start on the edge. I just think he's a good second rower. I thought he didn't have his best year for the Cowboys last year. His first year after leaving the Tigers and the Cowboys colours. I thought he was a bit hot and cold, to be completely honest with you. I'm worried the game's gone past him now, to be completely honest. He's still a good player, but Jeremiah Nanai is a huge loss for that Vegas game. But I think Bateman can do a job starting on that edge. Reuben Cotter, well, they can go either way here. They can start Reuben Cotter, which they've done many times at front row, or they will start him in the 13, which I believe is his position. And I reckon they'll start with Reuben Cotter. He'll play 80 minutes at locker, I've got no doubt. Now, I've gone Braden Burns at 14. This may not happen. This is just a guess from where I sit. They've got Harrison Edwards, Sam McIntyre, Kai O'Donnell, Matt Lodge, maybe 18th man. I'm not sure, but they've got these players. Viliami Vailea, he'll be fighting out for a centre position. I just don't think he's shown enough yet in his career to suggest that he can play consistent first-grade football. I would say that they will go over Jackson Purdue and Zach Laybutt in the centres. So, yeah, I've got Braden Burns as a 14 just to cover the backs. And I reckon you could put him in the halves if you were really short, if you really had to, or you switch things around there. So I think Braden Burns can cover a number of positions in that back line. I'd have him on the bench because I thought he did a pretty good job for the Cowboys last year when he did play. As I mentioned, 15, Harrison Edwards, 16, Sam McIntyre, 17, Kai O'Donnell, and they are coached by Todd Payton. So that is my Cowboys side for round one. Let's take a look at the Newcastle Knights. So before we do, though, I just want to go through the main losses for the Cowboys. They didn't lose much at all over the offseason. So Reece Robson, obviously a huge loss, but he's pretty much it. Their main gains, Matt Lodge, whether or not he plays consistent first-grade football, I'm not sure. I would think probably, based on the fact that Jordan McLean was a veteran forward, and he did play many games for the Cowboys in recent years. So I would say Matt Lodge will probably play at least half the season for the Cowboys in the first-grade squad, and Reed Marnie, obviously the other main game for the Cowboys. Let's have a look at the Newcastle Knights for this round one game in Vegas. Now, this is my Newcastle Knights round one prediction lineup. At fullback, Kalen Ponga. Number 2, Dominic Young. Number 3, Dane Gagai. Number 4, Bradman Best. Number 5, Greg Marziu. Number 6, Fletcher Sharp. Number 7, Dylan Brown. Number 8, Jacob Saifidi. 9, I reckon they're going to go with Phoenix Crossland based on footage I've seen at their training sessions online. I've seen Phoenix Crossland in that dummy half position a couple of times. So I reckon they're going to start with Phoenix Crossland at 9. Number 10, Trey Mooney from the Canberra Raiders. 11, Dylan Lucas, who was injured for a large portion of last year. They really missed him. He was one of their best players in 2025. Number 12, I've got Jermaine McEwen, and 13, Tyson Frizzell. 12, of course, was Kai Pearce-Paul, but he's off to the Tigers. 14, I reckon they're going to go Sandon Smith as 14. Cover hooker, halves, centers, wing if they were really short and they needed him there. But I think he'll cover. He could cover lock too as a ball playing lock. Good defender too, Sandon Smith. I reckon they'll go him 14 to start the season. 15, Pasami Solo from Canberra. 16, Matthew Croker, and 17, Corey Hopwood. I reckon they're going to start with not start with Corey Hopwood, but I reckon they'll give the kid a go for Vegas. He's a young gun coming through and has been at the ranks now for a couple of years at Newcastle. I reckon there's a massive rap on this kid, Corey Hopwood. Um, I reckon they need to play him every week, even if it's just off the bench for the whole 2026 season. I think give the kid the experience he needs now. From what I've heard, online, from what I've read online, from what I've heard on radio, this kid, there's massive rap on him. I've never seen him play, but I reckon they should start with him. He's a forward, and I reckon Justin Holbrook. He's the coach, of course, for the Newcastle Knights. I reckon he'll make sure he gives Corey Hopwood some game time, especially when Newcastle are trying to connect with their juniors as well and trying to develop them. I reckon Justin Holbrook, he will have a mission to have extra focus on Corey Hopwood and think to himself, all right, I'm the guy that helped bring him into first grade and helped develop this guy and turn him into a superstar forward. I reckon, from what I've heard, that's what Corey Hopwood can turn into. That's his potential. So the question marks, I mean, look, the reason why I've got the Cowboys winning this game is based on the forward pack, or lack of forwards, I should say, from the Newcastle Knights. So it does worry me that Jacob Saifidi and Trey Mooney are possibly going to be their starting front rowers. Good players, absolutely, but a couple of years ago you had Jacob Saifidi, Daniel Saifidi, like Adam Elliott. He's a huge loss. Like he's a good player, Adam Elliott. Leo Thompson's now gone. Kai Pearce-Paul, as I mentioned earlier, he's gone to the Tigers. Jaden Brayley hasn't played overly much football for Newcastle, especially over the last few years, but I reckon he's a huge loss, and a bigger loss than what Newcastle Knights fans may think, only based on the fact, well, maybe they already know it. They're diehard supporters, so they probably already know it. But based on, I think he's going to be a big loss to Newcastle based on his leadership, and I reckon that's one of the reasons Canberra bought him. I don't think he had any certainty going to Canberra that he'd be playing that number 9 every week when you've got Tom Starling in career best form, Owen Paddy coming through. Look, he probably won't play many games for Canberra, but what Jaden Brayley does bring, and I reckon Ricky Stewart noticed in Jaden Brayley's, oh, sorry, I was about to sneeze. Jaden Brayley's game is the fact that it's just his leadership qualities, his leadership skills, and I reckon he could end up being a really good coach down the track. He just gives me that vibe of somebody when he gets interviewed, he just knows football in and out, and I just think he's a player that would be really, really good for Canberra, just helping develop the younger guys too. So I think he's a bigger loss than what we all think. His playing ability was obviously great, but he wasn't the same player in 2025 as when he first came to Newcastle from the Cronulla Sharks, just based on the consistent injuries that he had over his career over the last few years. Jack Cogger, well, he played in the halves for the majority. He wore the number 7 for the majority of the season for Newcastle. So he's gone back to Penrith. And of course, their main gains, Dylan Brown, Sandon Smith, Trey Mooney, and Pasami Polo. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see Newcastle. That's my predicted lineup for round 1. I might be totally wrong, but originally I had Fletcher Sharp on the wing instead of Greg Marzu. I wasn't convinced that Justin Holbrook would start Fletcher Sharp in the halves. I think it's a good call to do it, but it's going to be really interesting. I mean, my opinion is I wonder if they're better, sort of for Newcastle, short-term pain for long-term gain. I wonder if Kalen Ponga moved on within the next year or two. I think that could be better for Newcastle long-term, and you put Fletcher Sharp to fullback. Dylan Brown is in the 7, in my opinion. Put him to 6, and then maybe you go Sandon Smith at 7, and then you all of a sudden with Ponga leaving and maybe a couple of other players like Greg Marzu and all that, then you've got some money for some good front rowers to come through and help Dylan Brown and Sandon Smith in the halves. That's what I'd do if I was in Newcastle, and I think most Newcastle fans would probably disagree with me, but I reckon Kalen Ponga, I reckon he's just chewing up too much money, and he's not playing many games every year. He's not playing. He's very injury prone. Like the fullbacks, Ryan Pappenhausen, Tom Trbojevic, Latrell Mitchell, Kalen Ponga, they are injured consistently, and they have been since 2021. So, whether or not it's the kilometres that they run, I saw a stat a few years ago, and it may have changed since the game has sped up, but I did see a stat that fullbacks run anywhere between 12 kilometers to 15 kilometers a game. And so, that obviously is a huge toll on the body when you're playing, um, you know, what is it, 27 rounds and then 3 to 4 weeks of finals. It's a lot, but I think, I just can't see where Newcastle win this game in Vegas. I really can't, unfortunately. I'd love to see them have a good year because they are genuinely one of my favourite clubs. When they won the Premiership in 2001, that was one of the first seasons I watched of rugby league. And they're just a working class town, aren't they? You've got to respect them. You've got to respect the supporters that turn up, even in the years they win the wooden spoon. But yeah, I've got the Knights winning this. I think even the experience of Jason Tamalolo and Cohen Hess up against Jacob Saifidi and Trey Mooney. Like I don't underestimate Jacob Saifidi and Trey Mooney individually with their talent and their go forward, but I just wonder how they can connect. I'm just a bit worried about the lack of combinations. Will it take time for Dylan Brown and Kalen Ponga to connect on the field? I think there's too many question marks for Newcastle for me going into this game. I'm going to go the Cowboys, and I think Scott Drinkwater will maybe possibly get man of the match. A few try assists, a try himself. It's going to be a really intriguing game. But they're my two predicted lineups for the Newcastle Knights versus the Cowboys for the first game of the 2026 season. We go across now to the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs up against the Dragons. This will be the second National Rugby League game. Now, I'm pretty sure it's going to be an NRL game. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I read this. It will be Cowboys and Newcastle, and then there'll be a Super League game. Hull FC, the Premiers, versus another side. I can't remember who that is. I'm not across Super League, I'm afraid. And then the second NRL game and the final game of the day will be the Bulldogs and the Dragons. So I've written down here my round one predicted squads for the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs in Vegas against the Dragons. So at 1, I've got Connor Tracy. 2, Jacob Carraz. 3, Bronson Sherry. 4, Stephen Crichton. 5, Marcelo Montoya. 6, Matt Burton. 7, Lachlan Galvin. 8, Max King. 9, Bailey Haywood. 10, Leo Thompson. 11, Viliami Kickow. 12, Jacob Preston. 13, Jamin Salmon. 14, Kurt Mann. 15, Satili Tupanua. 16, Josh Curran. And 17, Harry Hayes, who's a bloody good player off the bench too. Now, obviously, there's a lot of question marks in this team, and I could be completely wrong about this predicted Bulldogs side by the time they run out to Vegas on the 1st of March 2026. There are many questions. I reckon this is the way they're going to start the season. And I reckon by the end of the season, Mitchell Woods will wear the 7, and Matt Burton will possibly go fullback or in the centres. I'm not sure. But I think by the end of the season of the 2026 season for Canterbury, I reckon it'll be Matt Burton at 6. Lachlan Galvin at 6, and number 7, it will be Mitch Woods. I reckon they're the halves combination, and the halves combination for the Bulldogs for the next 10 years. I could really see that happening. Question marks. What do they do long term? I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see what they do in the trials too, because they've got their gains. They've got Sean O'Sullivan, Leo Thompson, and Cade Dykes. They're the main gains they've gotten for the 2026 season and beyond. And the main losses, Toby Sexton, we all know the story of him going to the Super League for a year, and then he'll come back and be the halfback of the Perth Bears for 2027. Reid Marnie, he's gone to the Cowboys. Blake Taff, Curtis Moran, and Drew Hutchinson. So they're the main losses for Canterbury. It's going to be really interesting what they do. I put a question mark over Jamin Salmon and Kurt Mann. Salmon could be the 14. Kurt Mann could definitely start at 13, but I think they're pretty sold on Jamin Salmon staying in that 13 position just based on the way he is just that extra half. Kurt Mann, I reckon, just comes on with more energy when he comes on off the bench. Josh Curran, I think, will start from the bench. I can't see him replace. To me, he's an edge forward, and I can't see him replacing Kickow or Jacob Preston in round 1. I think those two players are locked in for that season in those second row positions. Cade Dykes is a young fella from Cronulla. Plenty of talent. So Connor Tracy, he's got a bit of pressure on him. He's got to hold on to that position for this year. He's a really underrated player, Connor Tracy, but can they win a premiership with Connor Tracy at fullback? My opinion is no. Can they win it with Stephen Crichton or Matt Burton at fullback? I'd say Stephen Crichton at fullback, they definitely can. So it'll be really interesting to see. Personally, as I mentioned, I believe at the end of the season, The fullback, I reckon, will be Stephen Crichton by the end of the year, and I do think it'll be Galvin in 6 and 7, Mitch Woods. So they are coached by Cameron Serraldo. That is my round one predicted Bulldogs side against the Dragons. Let's cross over to the St. George Illawarra Dragons team now for the third game of Vegas and the second game of the National Rugby League season. Now, I've gone fullback Clint Gutherson. That's no surprise to anybody. Now, I've heard Shane Flanagan do an interview a few weeks ago, and he talked about this young kid coming up who's training for them called Setu Tu, and he's a promising outside back. And they've bought him recently, the Dragons, and there's a massive raps on this young kid. I reckon from the way Shane Flanagan spoke about him, I reckon he'll start in that number 2 jersey. Number 3, Moses Surley. 4, Valentine Holmes. 5, Christian Tuapolotu. 6, Cole. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear that bloody door squeaking. One sec. I'll get up and close. Sorry about that. We have a lot of wind right now, and that door was just banging and squeaking away. 4, Valentine Holmes, who was injured for half the season last year, and when he played, he was outstanding for the Dragons. 5, I've got Christian Tuapolotu. Now, there's no guarantee that he will start the season. It's not based on form. I thought he played really well for the Dragons last year when he played Mr. Moneyman when he scored a try. But the thing about Christian Tuapolotu is he has had consistent hamstring injuries, and I did hear Shane Flanagan recently say that he's not 100% sure if he'll be fit enough to start the year, but they think he will be. But I've written him down now, but he's very touch and go. We'll see how he goes, but I hope for his sake and Dragons fans' sake, he starts in the number 5 jersey for the St. George Illawarra Dragons. Number 6, Kyle Flanagan, and 7, Daniel Atkinson. Shane Flanagan and the Dragons have already announced that will be their halves combination for season 2026. Originally, I thought Flanagan would stay at 7 and Atkinson would be at 6, but I like the move of Atkinson. I think he's a good player. We didn't see much of him last year for Cronulla off the bench. He played a majority of the season, I'm pretty sure, but didn't see too much of him. I didn't think he played enough minutes, really, to be honest, to see how he goes. But I'm confident he can have a pretty good year at the Dragons. Number 8, Toby Couchman. 9, Damien Cook. 10, Amrade Gula. 11, Luciano Leilua. 12, Jaden Sewer. And 13, Hamish Stewart. 14, Jacob Little. 15, Ryan Couchman. 16, Blake Laurie. 17, Josh Kerr. And as 18th man in this game, I almost had him on the bench, but I've got Loco Pacifica Tonga. Great player. Really good player. But I'm not sure if he will start or not. I'm not sure. I don't think he'll start. If he plays, I think he'll come off the bench. Every chance he does play, because Ryan Couchman, I've written him down, but that's only if he's fit coming back from that ACL. I'm pretty sure got injured in round 1 or round 2 last year. So he should be right to play, but there's no guarantee about Ryan Couchman. Blake Laurie. It's fair to say Shane Flanagan's probably not a huge fan of the player Blake Laurie, just based on the fact that after Anthony Griffin was the coach, he was starting in that number 8 jersey for a few years there for the Dragons and played bloody well, just quietly. And I think Shane Flanagan, he doesn't start him much. He comes, brings him off the bench, and they were shopping him around it. Pretty sure I heard recently. So going to be interesting to see. But I think Blake Laurie is a good player. I do think he will be really good off the bench. And Josh Kerr, they've got him back to the Dragons from the Dolphins. I've got him on the bench. I'm pretty confident he will start in the 17 jersey or possibly 16 jersey off the bench. Shane Flanagan, obviously, is their coach. I've got the Bulldogs winning this game big. I really do. When I did my round 1 tips and predictions a couple of weeks ago, you can find it on the Spotify, Rugby League Forecast Spotify page, or you can also find it on the YouTube channel. I suggested that, the Cowboys and the Knights game, I said the Cowboys will win that big. And now the more I'm thinking about that, the more I look at the lineups, I'm thinking I'm not sure because sure, the Newcastle Knights don't have many front rowers in terms of they don't have much size, and that really worries me. They have a lack of depth in the front row. I think Adam Elliott, as I mentioned earlier, he's a huge loss. So going to be really interesting to see how they go there. But Yeah, I think the Bulldogs win this big. I'm just looking at their lineup, and sure, I think there will be many changes throughout the season, but they do have a pretty stable lineup compared to the Dragons, who have a brand new halves combination, a couple of players coming back from injuries. You still have some question marks. I've got Luciano Leilua starting in the 11 jersey. That's no guarantee either. Um, Dylan Egan, he's you know he's out for the start of the season. He'll normally be in that 11 jersey, and Luciano Leilua will come off the bench down the track. That's the way I think it'll go. But Dylan Egan's a big loss, I think, as well. And let's go through their main games. So they've got Daniel Atkinson, Josh Kerr, David Farley. Their main losses: Jack DeBellin, huge loss, and I think he's a huge loss for this Vegas game as well. Just his experience and being a one clubman at the Dragons for so long, they really could have had him for this Vegas game. Tom Eisenhuth, he's retiring. Lachlan Ilias, he's gone up to the Gold Coast. David Clemmer, Jonah Glover off to South Sydney. David Clemmer, I think, has gone to Super League, I'm pretty sure. Sione Finau, I'm pretty sure he's gone to the Dolphins. Cody Ramsey to the Roosters, and Ben Murdoch-Masila, pretty sure he's gone back to the Super League. I'll have to double check that, but they're the losses. So they're really changing the lineup. A lot of outs coming, and I reckon the Dragons are relying on their younger players coming through. So a really exciting time for the Dragons. I don't think they're going to necessarily have a great year, but there are players that I really want to watch go hard. I think Hamish Stewart, everyone's got their eyes on players like Dylan Egan, Hamish Stewart. Jacob Little for me was the best number 14 of the year in 2025. Loko Pacifica Tonga, Setu 2, even Tua Pilotu. He played last year for the Dragons, and I thought he had a pretty good year when he did play and when he wasn't injured. So just really interesting to see how Kyle Flanagan and Daniel Atkinson combine. But look, we did see an upset last year in Vegas, and it was the Canberra Raiders. They beat the Warriors. That was the first game of the year. So as I mentioned, I've gone the Cowboys beating the Knights, but I'm really confident the Bulldogs win this big. But I mean, who knows? Like, honestly, I could both get that wrong. I could get those two games wrong and just look at the sky and go, here we go again. But that's why I love rugby league, because it's so unpredictable. You don't know. At the end of the day, I might be doing a podcast, but I think it's fair to say at the same time, I've got no idea what the fuck I'm doing. I'm just having a bit of fun. I'm just doing predictions. I love rugby league, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know it all. And I don't think I ever will. And I reckon even the greatest coaches of all time, Wayne Bennett, Craig Bellamy, I reckon they're still learning every day about how to be a great NRL coach, considering how successful they are. So, I just think that's a great thing about the game is you continue learning. I love rugby league, and it's such a big part of my life. But I'm like everyone. I get things wrong, so I'm not going to pretend on this podcast. If I get things wrong, I'm not going to not mention it. I'll mention it and put my hand up. And I think it's all about having fun and taking accountability and having a laugh, because I think if you don't laugh, you cry in this game, unfortunately, especially as a Manly fan going into 2026. I'm just not sure how that's going to go, but that's for another podcast. Really looking forward to Vegas. Honestly, oh man, I can't wait. March the 1st. I'm so excited for the preseason challenge. It's their trial games, but it's just like, as a rugby league fan that takes NRL tipping so seriously, as many of you listening to this and watching this would be the same as me, just a rugby league nerd. It's just so exciting for the trials to be back, to see younger players play, and just to see, for example, I hope they play Cade Dykes for Cronulla. I want to see Sean O'Sullivan in the halves for Newcastle. I want to see Leo Thompson, for start at front row in a trial match for the Bulldogs. Whether or not they will, I'm not sure. I think the Bulldogs, they'll have two trials, but the first trial, it'll be interesting if they play any of the Vegas players. I'm not sure. But, I'd love to see in the trials, for example, Daniel Atkinson in the halves, Josh Kerr, where does he play? Front row, edge, lock, when he comes on from the bench, David Farley, just these players. And even for, players like Lachlan Ilias at the Gold Coast Titans and Cody Ramsey at the Roosters, and players that aren't guaranteed to get a spot, but will really show how valuable they are as depth. I think that's what I love about the trials, is it really defines which clubs have depth and which don't. And I think the Dragons. I reckon, they're losing a lot of players, but they've got a lot of young players coming through. I think it's a really exciting period. But even in the trials, what do they do? Dylan Brown, does he start in the halves? I'm not sure, but it's going to be really interesting. I can't wait to the 2026 season. This is the Rugby League Forecast Podcast, my predicted round one Vegas games. Thank you very much for listening on Spotify and watching on YouTube. If you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe. And follow me on Spotify. And I really hope you guys are enjoying the podcast. And thank you so much to everybody that is listening. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I want you guys to comment and feel very involved in this Rugby League Forecast podcast community, which I'm trying to create. All right, cheers, guys. Thanks.